Hey, AUMC church family, welcome to the Friday E-Blast with one of your pastors. My name's Amy Gerhardt. I'm the lead pastor, and we're trying every Friday morning to offer an opportunity for us to chat with you by video on our E-Blast so that you can learn a little bit more about what's going on in the life of the church, so we can update you on any changes and keep people well informed about how our church is doing with our ministry and our mission. Today, we're joined by Tammy Box, our wonderful chair of finance, who, as you know, has been just such an incredibly important part of telling our story and telling the truth and keeping people well informed about our financial health. So we thought this would be a great day to do that because we have some exciting news to share. Thanks for being with us, Tammy.
No problem. I will pull up some slides so we can walk through some of the current circumstance around what we're seeing with AUMC and the impact from COVID-19. Okay, so let me move to the second slide, Amy, and you can remind us what this means.
Right, we might remember seeing this slide when we were working through our financial stewardship program this past fall and really thinking through some new and creative and innovative ways to enhance and develop our financial health as a church. I introduced the idea of what I call the crisis trinity, and this is a way that we help congregations and all kinds of organizations to move through a time of crisis, whether that's good crisis or challenging crisis. We start by telling the truth, and we'll do that today about where we are with our financial health in these COVID-19 days. Then we hear the grief and the questions that people have as they respond to that truth and as they ask questions and as we move forward. And then always as people of faith, we move through crisis by casting a vision that comes from God, a vision that we share among one another, and a vision that we live into together. It's a vision of hope.
I will take over telling the truth part. So the truth about AUMC is our faith and our generosity. So if you look at the first 3 months of 2020, through 3 months, so through the end of March, we anticipate 25% of our annual income budget to be received. And in fact, we received 32%. So we are ahead for the year so far, and that is very positive news. But the grief part of the story is we're starting to see a few little blips in the system that we wanted to explain to you. Again, we're not sure if this is just a blip, an anomaly, or it's possibly start of a trend. We know that COVID-19 is going to have impacts on our families. And so we want to stay ahead of this and try to understand it as best we can. It's a little challenging, but let me walk you through what we're seeing. So by April, we of course started seeing an impact on our facility income. So the groups that rent our facilities. So let me explain that first. We have about a 91% reduction in our facility income. Our facility income amounts to approximately $2,500 plus per month. And we're down to around $225 for the last 2 months on average. So we expect that to extend throughout the year. The second part that we're seeing a little blip on is in the third week of April, we see potentially an impact on our envelope giving. Now, in terms of our total commitment giving, envelope giving accounts for about 75% of the way we do our total commitments. Online giving accounts for approximately the other 30%. So a 43% reduction in envelope giving as a blip in the third week of April may be significant. So I throw all that out there, but I also want to say that these are based on some very preliminary data. There is a great statistician to whom I am very distantly related, named George Box, and he tells us that all models are wrong, some are useful. So what I'm going to show you is not a model, but hopefully something useful. And we'll continue to update that throughout the year. So taking that 43% reduction in our envelope giving and the 91% reduction in our facility income, we can somewhat project that it's possible to have a shortfall of at least $43,000. I added a few notes in the bottom, so those of you who like numbers can look at that a little deeper. I will note that we expect our expenses to go down a little bit too with the reduction in the use of our facilities. But for the purposes of risk assessment and wanting to get ahead of this, we're leaving that out of these calculations and we're just looking at where our income stands. So that's the current situation. As I said, we'll continue to update you on this because we don't have a lot of data on which to base these calculations.
But we did feel that it was important for us to take a temperature check about where we are right now so that we can also understand what might be coming ahead. And one of the first gifts of good news that we have that helps us as we make these projections and look at this kind of a trend is that recently AUMC applied for one of the Paycheck Protection Program loans, or what is called in the media and by the federal government, PPP. Let me explain a little bit about what that is. So the PPP loan is an opportunity for small businesses, nonprofits, and even churches to have applied to the federal government for one of the CARES Act provisions that you have heard about in the news. As you also have heard, the PPP has been distributed in full, and we are awaiting a new federal act to be able to make more funds available for small businesses. With incredible leadership from our business manager, Laura Winberg, as well as a partnership with First Bank, we were able, very fortunately, to secure the first round of PPP. That amounts to a loan of $132,500 for the church to cover payroll costs and utilities for the period between April 21st and June 30th of this year. If we comply with the federal government provisions, and if we limit those resources that came from PPP to our church for simply payroll of our church staff and our KDD staff, as well as utilities, we can transition that loan to a grant. So we will be seeking that loan forgiveness based on the conditions of compliance and have full confidence that we should be able to comply in such a way that this will not become a burden on the church's budget going forward, but will allow us to receive it as a grant. So what happens because of PPP? Well, as this slide shows, if we anticipate continuing the 43% reduction in envelope giving and 91% reduction in facility income, we have a bump of income surplus that comes through PPP for the period between April 21st and June 30th of this year. By applying that PPP to help offset our payrolls as well as utility costs that are in compliance with the federal regulations, we will actually, going with this trend forward, have the potential of having a surplus of about $88,000 going into the second half of 2020. That's very exciting for us as a church. And of course, we aren't sure how the continued trends with COVID will impact our second half of the year. But this gives us an understanding that we are going to be in a good place going into summer, which is typically our lower return season for the church. And hopefully will help us get out of the bump of not being able to be in person for worship. And as we transition to in-person gatherings, hopefully later in this year. But you might be asking, what would happen to the surplus if we ended the year with a surplus? Well, first of all, we would raise a hallelujah and thank God for those provisions, because that would be a wonderful experience for our church. We would hope to be building back our reserves that we had to use some over the past few years to help offset the operating budget. And of course, we would be applying some of these funds to sustaining and continuing and growing our mission as a church. This is a mission that has remarkably been sustained through all of our COVID impact. We continue to feed the hungry. We continue to care for the homeless. We continue to reach out in connection to our entire congregation and our community. We continue to offer great worship and experiences of connection through small groups and ministry teams. Our church is staying alive and vital in its ministry and witness, especially through these COVID days. And this resource will be an extra opportunity for us to sustain that mission and ministry into the fullness of 2020. So what can you do? What can I do? This is the work that the community does together. First of all, you can please continue your giving as you're able. We do have some households in our congregation who have alerted us to the fact that they are now job insecure or food insecure. Luckily, not too many folks in our congregation yet are housing insecure, but we are ministering to folks who are. And so we invite you to continue your giving as you're able and to let the church office know if there needs to be a change in your giving so that we can help you with whatever needs you have, as well as understand how we can continue to budget faithfully. Pray about tithing or contributing part of your stimulus check. This isn't possible for a lot of families. Many of our families are going to need those checks to sustain their operations through these COVID days. But for some of us, that might be a possibility. So if you would like to pray about tithing or contributing part of your stimulus, you can go ahead and do that by writing a check to the church or by contributing electronically through our website and through Shelby Giving. The third thing you might do is continue or begin to contribute to the Arvada COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund. We are securing in excess now of $15,000, and we see that fund growing, and we are distributing those funds as we receive them to work with the partnerships with our community table partnership and reaching out to families in need throughout our region, our community, as well as families and households in need within our church family. Your contribution to that as a special gift will be indicated on your tax statement and will be an opportunity for you to continue to sustain the church's ministry and mission in these very unique days. Of course, if you have any questions about giving, you can certainly reach out to Laura Winberg, our business manager, one of your pastors, or send your question to info@arvadaumc.org. Also, we want to remind you, we will continue to update these estimates and this information as we go forward through this year. That's a commitment we made even when we were still in person for worship. And it's a commitment that will sustain through our gathered conversations online, through snail mail, and other connections through our circuit rider. We will keep you informed, but don't hesitate to ask any questions through this journey as we're continuing to grow in trust, as we're continuing to grow in transparency, and as we're continuing in our commitment to stay in communication with one another. Tammy, thank you so much always for your great work in helping us have a picture of what's going on. It helps us to do our stewardship and our financial work so much better as a congregation. We appreciate your gifts and the gifts of the entire congregation as we continue to join together our resources, our prayers, our time, and our hearts in these COVID days. We miss you. We love you. We look forward to gathering in person again very soon. Thank you for joining us for the Friday E-Blast.